The lie was centuries old, so deeply woven into galactic history that even many humans had come to believe it. From the moment Earth made first contact with the wider galaxy, the Council of Species had established itself as the guiding authority. They claimed that peace and unity across the stars could only be achieved if the most violent species were restrained, nurtured, and guided away from destructive paths. Humanity, they argued, was too unstable, too young, too reckless, too filled with blood-soaked history, to be trusted with a place at the council table. Generations of Terrans grew up hearing the same rhetoric: evolve, prove yourselves, temper your instincts. Humanity was told to be patient, to wait, and eventually, they would be deemed ready. For decades, humans swallowed this narrative. Earth's diplomats worked tirelessly to showcase cooperation, while colonies bent under council regulations that stifled expansion, trade, and even military growth. The truth, however, was buried in restricted archives, hidden from the public eye. When the documents leaked, smuggled by a sympathetic alien scholar, it shattered the carefully crafted illusion. The council had never intended to grant humanity equality. The records were clear: they saw humanity's wars not as a shameful past to outgrow, but as a prophecy of terror. Humanity's tenacity, their stubborn refusal to die even when cornered, their ability to rise from ashes stronger than before. These were what the council feared most. It was not Earth's barbarism that made them unworthy. It was their potential to endure, to resist, to adapt where others crumbled. Species older and mightier had faced extinction when tested. Humanity had faced endless cycles of disaster, war, famine, and conquest, and survived them all. To the council, humanity was not a child in need of guidance, but a rival too dangerous to admit into the halls of power. When the truth reached the colonies, anger boiled over. Miners on Mars, engineers in the Belt, and farmers on Titan, all of them realized their sacrifices and compliance had been nothing more than containment. The sense of betrayal was profound. But it was also unifying. For the first time, scattered Terran settlements looked at each other not as separate worlds, but as one people wronged. One species denied its rightful place. Humanity was no longer waiting for approval. The great deception had been uncovered, and the fire it sparked could not be smothered. You said key point 2 expand into 400 words without heading and conclusion, ChatGPT said. The revelation did not spread slowly. It erupted like wildfire through every human colony, igniting fury that centuries had failed to spark. On Earth, the news crashed through broadcast networks, sparking protests that filled every major city. Crowds stormed council liaison offices, tearing down banners of supposed unity that now reeked of hypocrisy. In the colonies, the reaction was even sharper. On Mars, workers abandoned their posts in the domed cities, gathering in the streets to chant against the council. On Europa, the military garrisons, long bound by restrictive treaties forbidding advanced weapons development, began drilling openly, their defiance a declaration of intent. It was not mere outrage. It was centuries of suppressed resentment suddenly given fuel. Humanity had long endured the council's interference in their politics, economy, and culture. Trade restrictions kept Terran technology from competing on equal footing. Regulations forbade certain weapons and even limited ship production. Colonists who dared to expand beyond approved zones found their settlements dismantled or sanctioned. All of this had been justified under the claim that Earth's children needed guidance to grow. Now, those justifications were stripped bare, revealed as nothing more than a mask to contain a threat the council feared but could not admit. For once, humanity's legendary divisiveness vanished. Old rivalries between Earth governments, disputes between colonies, even centuries-old grudges dissolved under the weight of betrayal. People who had never seen themselves as part of a united species, suddenly found common ground in outrage. The council had treated them all as dangerous animals to be penned in, and in that insult, every Terran world found shared purpose. Humanity, fractured for so long, began to coalesce. On Titan, banners unfurled across settlements reading "No more chains." On Ceres, miners who had spent generations laboring under council-controlled corporations seized control of the docking yards and pledged allegiance to the growing Terran movement. Across 50 worlds, the cry was the same: no more waiting, no more begging for approval. Humanity's patience had turned to anger, and their anger to unity. The lies of the council had not weakened them. They had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before, a united human civilization, standing together at last. You said key point 3. Expand into 400 words without heading and conclusion, ChatGPT said. The councils had always projected an image of calm authority. A place where disputes were settled with measured voices and elegant words. Yet when the fury of humanity reached its doors, that calm fractured. Representatives of the elder species convened in emergency session, their voices sharp with unease. They knew the revelation had spread too far to be buried, and the human response had been far swifter and more united than anticipated. The Council had always relied on humanity's own internal divisions to keep them manageable, but the disclosure of their deception had created the very unity they feared most. To justify themselves, the Council leaders turned to the narrative they had cultivated for centuries. We acted to protect the galaxy, declared Chancellor Vera of the Thaler, her voice resonating across the chamber. Humanity's history is one of bloodshed, conquest, and we did not lie. We safeguarded peace. Others echoed her, speaking of humanity's wars as proof of their unrestrained violence. Ancient battles were cited, images at Earth's ruined cities replayed, and statistics of lost lives recounted as if they were evidence in a trial. The argument was simple: humanity's potential for destruction outweighed its right to rise. But beneath the formal words, fear was plain. Even the most powerful species in the Council whispered in private of the danger now looming. They remembered humanity's relentless will to survive, their refusal to surrender even when logic dictated they should. The Cathari representative admitted in hushed tones what many already knew. They do not break as we do. That is what makes them dangerous. The Council's true fear was not of humanity's past, but of their future. What they might become if allowed to advance unchecked. Despite their carefully rehearsed speeches, cracks in their unity were already forming. Some species, particularly the younger ones, who had long felt the Council's heavy hand themselves, sympathized with humanity's plight. They questioned whether the so-called safeguards were protection or oppression. Others grew restless at the thought of Terran fleets rising in rebellion, knowing that a war with humanity would not be swift or bloodless. As the chamber filled with accusations and counterarguments, it became clear that the Council's authority was faltering. Their attempts to justify centuries of deceit only exposed the fear at their core, and the galaxy was beginning to see it. You said key point 4. Expand into 400 words without heading in conclusion, ChatGPT said. Ambassador Rain stood at the center of the chamber, a lone human figure dwarfed by the towerings of alien representatives. The Council had tried to silence him, to relegate him to a corner as they debated humanity's fate, but he refused to be dismissed. His voice carried with a resonance born not from amplification, but from conviction, and every word struck with the weight of a people betrayed. You call us violent, he began, his eyes sweeping the hall. But it was not violence that brought us here, it was survival. You twist our history into a weapon against us, but you forget one truth: we are still here. For every war, every disaster, every chain you placed upon us, humanity endures. The chamber grew tense. Many Council members shifted uncomfortably, their expressions betraying unease at his defiance. For centuries, humans had played the role of eager students, nodding politely at every reprimand. This was something different. Rains did not beg for approval. He did not ask for forgiveness. He demanded recognition. You feared us not because of what we have done, but because of what we can do, he continued. You feared that one day we would stand beside you as equals, no longer beneath your leash. And now that day has come, and you tremble because you see it in our eyes. We are not monsters. We are survivors, fighters, builders. And nothing you say now can chain us again. The words rippled outward, broadcast live to billions of humans across the stars. Colonists in the icy mines of Europa, settlers on the deserts of Mars, and ship crews in the void between worlds, watched their ambassador speak with a fire they had carried in silence for too long. His defiance became their own, his voice an anthem for their rage and pride. Among the Council, silence fell, no rebuttal came quickly. For there was no counter to the raw truth of his words. For the first time, the alien leaders looked upon a human representative not as a subject of discipline, but as a peer staring them down. And in that moment, they understood why they had tried so hard to contain humanity. Because they could not control them. Humanity's spirit was unyielding, and it had just been given a voice the entire galaxy could hear. You said, key point 5, expand into 400 words without heading and conclusion, ChatGPT said. Outside the Council chambers, the galaxy's capital had become a crucible of sound and fury. The protests that had begun as scattered gatherings now swelled into a tidal wave of humanity's voice. Tens of thousands filled the plazas, their chants rising in a rhythm that shook the towering spires of the city. The words were simple. No more chains, no more lies, but carried with them the weight of centuries. Human banners snapped in the artificial winds, their symbols of unity spreading across alien media feeds in real time. The Council tried to portray the protests as disorder. But what the galaxy witnessed was not chaos, it was solidarity. The roar of humanity was not confined to the capital. Across every colony, demonstrations mirrored the same passion. On Mars, domed cities echoed with marches as colonists lit the sky visible even from orbit. On Titan, settlers used ice-cutting machines to carve massive words into the frozen plains, "We rise together." Miners in the asteroid belt sealed entire docking stations, until their demands for recognition were acknowledged. Everywhere, humanity's voice was no longer fragmented whispers. It was a single, unrelenting storm. For other species, the sight was unsettling. The Council had often pointed to humanity's divisiveness as proof of their instability. Yet now that same species was standing shoulder to shoulder, their rage binding them tighter than any treaty ever had. It was a unity born not of political convenience, but of shared betrayal. The galaxy realized that when humans chose to direct their energy toward a single purpose, their strength multiplied beyond measure. The protests also marked a shift in power. Alien merchants who had long exploited Terran colonies watched nervously as supply lines shut down under worker strikes. Council patrols attempting to quell demonstrations found themselves vastly outnumbered, unable to respond without risking escalation. Even among alien populations, sympathy began to grow. Many who had suffered under the Council's restrictions saw in humanity's roar a mirror of their own frustrations. And whispers of alliance began to spread. The chants outside the Council chambers reached their peak. Ambassador Rain's words echoed through the feeds. Every syllable was answered by thunderous affirmation, each roar from the crowd becoming a declaration heard across the stars. The Council, once confident in its dominance, now found its authority drowned beneath the unstoppable voice of a united humanity. You said key point 6 spanned into 400 words without heading and conclusion, ChatGPT said. The storm that had begun with anger soon transformed into something far greater. Humanity's protests were no longer just words, they became action. Across the colonies, leaders who once quarreled over resources and politics now stood together, drafting the first true Terran charter that united Earth and its far-flung worlds under a single banner. It was not a government born of coercion but of choice, forged in the fire of betrayal. For the first time in recorded history, humans everywhere spoke with one voice. A voice that declared they would no longer bow to the Council's decrees. Fleets that had been scattered and regulated began to reorganize. Old ships, once limited by Council oversight, were refitted with hidden technologies that engineers had developed in secret. New designs emerged, faster, tougher, sharper than anything humanity had ever been permitted to build. On Ceres, entire shipyards shifted into overdrive, while on Earth, military academies opened their doors to volunteers from every colony. Farmers became soldiers, miners became pilots, and students became leaders. What had once been a population constrained by restrictions now became an unstoppable force galvanized by purpose. The Council watched with alarm as this transformation unfolded. They had expected riots to fade, for divisions to resurface, for humanity's passion to burn out as it always had. Instead, the opposite occurred. Every attempt to intimidate humanity only hardened their resolve. Every warning broadcast from the Council chambers was drowned beneath chants of unity. Humanity had moved beyond outrage. They were building a future no longer tethered to permission. Even among alien worlds, the shift was undeniable. Species long suppressed by the Council's bureaucracy saw in humanity's defiance the possibility of their own liberation. Whispered messages of support began reaching Terran channels. Offers of trade, intelligence, even secret military aid. What had started as a human rebellion was becoming the spark of something larger, a challenge to the very structure of galactic power. When the first Terran fleet raised its banners and launched from Earth, it was not an act of war but of declaration. The galaxy would no longer see humanity as reckless children at the Council's gates. They would see them as equals demanding recognition, or rivals demanding respect. The age of submission had ended, and in its place dawned a new era, the rise of humanity, no longer waiting for permission, but seizing its destiny among the stars.